There's a truth most men will never uncover, not because it's hidden, but because it challenges everything they've been taught. You think validation is kindness, that it brings you closer to her, that every compliment, every sweet word, makes her feel loved. But the truth, validation is not emotional generosity. It's a chemical transaction, and her brain is wired to crave it, not once in a while, but relentlessly, every time you tell her she's beautiful, every time you admire her photo, every time you remind her of how much she means to you. You're not just connecting, you're triggering a dopamine response almost identical to the high of narcotic drugs. This isn't poetry. This is neurobiology. But here's what no one prepares you for. Like any drug, validation loses its power the moment it becomes predictable. You praise her constantly, her mind adapts. Her thrill fades. Her receptors grow numb. And soon, the very thing you thought would pull her close makes you invisible. Most men assume attention is the currency of affection. So they overpay, compliment after compliment, message after message, each one hoping to buy connection, but they end up bankrupting their value, not because they weren't sincere, but because they were abundant. The men who understand this don't chase. They calibrate because they know something primal. Scarcity breeds desire. Consistency breeds contempt. When you pull back not to punish her, but to return to your purpose, her mind doesn't relax. It activates. She starts wondering, searching, not because you played games, but because you triggered what her nervous system responds to: uncertainty. Think of it like a bank account. High value men don't deposit endlessly. They let the balance rise and fall, just enough to keep her invested, but never enough for her to feel entirely safe. That's the 70-30th rule. 70% of the time, you show up with presence, clarity, appreciation, but the other 30, you disappear not out of coldness, but because you're not here to be consumed. You are earned, not taken for granted. You look stunning tonight. Specific, real, earned. You always look good. That's background noise. Want to make her remember you? Don't flatter the surface. Praise her originality. Admire her strength. Notice what most men overlook. That's how you reach the self, not the image. Even Machiavelli, long before psychology had a name for it, understood power is not in giving. Power is in timing. Validation isn't free. It's a resource. Use it like an investor, not like a gambler throwing his last chip into the dark. But tread carefully. Too much distance, she goes cold. Too much closeness, she stops caring. The secret lies in rhythm. Feed her, but never fill her. Let her feel your presence, but never own it. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And if this hits something inside you, then you're ready. Subscribe, because what comes next exposes a darker illusion most men will never escape. Emotional gap. 1. Validation addiction. The second emotional gap runs deeper than validation. It's the hidden force behind almost every romantic failure. The one thing she insists she wants. But the moment you give it to her, everything shifts. She says she wants certainty. She asks for commitment. She begs for clarity. But what she doesn't say, what she likely doesn't even realize, is that her desire dies in absolute safety, because what soothes her logically often starves her emotionally. It's not security that sparks desire, it's the unknown, the unscripted, the energy she can't fully name, The very thing that makes her feel stable also kills the thrill. And you'll see it when she stops lighting up at your messages, when she delays replies, when she seems close but distant, not because you did anything wrong, but because you gave her everything too soon. This gap is more dangerous than any compliment because it tricks you into thinking you're being a good man, when in reality, you're becoming predictable. Stay sharp, because the next few moments will show you why uncertainty, not affection, is the fuel of her obsession. Emotional gap 2, addiction to uncertainty. Most men walk into this trap smiling. They think they're being good men. They think planning, consistency, and emotional availability will win her over. They give everything, the schedule, the replies, the full itinerary of their heart. And then they wonder why she starts to pull away. This is emotional gap number 2. And it's more dangerous than validation, because what she says she wants is exactly what kills her desire the moment she gets it. She asks for clarity. She says she needs stability. She talks about safety. But deep inside, wired into her nervous system, is a craving for the unknown. Not chaos, not deception, but mystery. A flavor of uncertainty that keeps her emotionally alert. Her body doesn't light up at predictability. Her passion doesn't respond to reliability. What pulls her in is tension. Not tension in words, tension in presence. It's the moment she can't read you. The second she feels like she doesn't fully know what's going on. It's the version of you she can't control that keeps her intrigued. You've seen it before. The man who texts back too fast, who clears his schedule for her, who gives her total transparency. And then one day he becomes invisible, not because he did something wrong, but because he removed all friction, all edge, all sense of emotional pursuit. The truth is simple. Desire can't breathe in total certainty. It dies in comfort. It suffocates in routine. It vanishes the moment there's nothing left to guess. Her mind doesn't obsess over clarity. It spirals over questions, over missing pieces, over fragments of you that remain out of reach. This isn't manipulation. This is psychological structure. There's a reason why your full attention makes her drift, why your perfect availability makes her bored. Her brain, like yours, is wired for survival, and survival requires alertness. Uncertainty triggers that alertness. It keeps her engaged. The Zeigarnik effect explains it best. The mind holds on to unfinished stories, questions that haven't been answered, moments that aren't fully resolved. When she knows exactly what you'll say, when she can script your every move, her mind quiets. And a quiet mind is a bored one. The most magnetic men aren't talkers. They're not narrators of their lives. They're not spilling timelines and to-do lists. They are men of presence, men of mystery, men who let you see just enough, but never everything. You don't hand her the whole story. You let her chase the plot, 70% visible, 30% concealed. That's not deception. That's discipline. When she asks about your past, you don't draft a novel. You give her a single page and let her imagination do the rest. When she wants to know your future, you share the direction, but never the map, because power is not in what you show, it's in what you withhold. A man who reveals everything is a man who loses his edge before the seduction even begins. A man who is easy to read becomes easy to forget. Mystery isn't a trick. It's a byproduct, a result of being busy with purpose, of living a life too focused to explain. If you have to fake mystery, You've already lost her. But if you're fully engaged with your mission, you naturally become a presence she can't decode. You're not distant. You're just unavailable for inspection. She asks, "What did you do today?" You say, "Had a conversation that might shift a few things." Then you move on. No long explanation. No performance. Just a statement with weight. Now her mind starts to spin. What conversation, what's shifting, why won't he tell me more? She becomes the question, and you become the silence she can't stop chasing. This isn't a game, it's biology. You speak in edges, not outlines. You give her a taste, not the whole meal. You're not her diary, you're her puzzle. But here's the key: mystery without meaning is emptiness. Don't just be vague, be valuable. There must be truth behind the silence, depth behind the restraint. Don't pour the water. Offer the sip and walk away. Let her follow the tension you left behind. Let her wonder. Let her feel the absence of total access. Let her realize your attention is earned, not guaranteed. You have 90 days, not to win her, but to prove that your restraint isn't ego, it's substance. If you fail, you'll feel her grow annoyed. She'll sense the emptiness and walk. If you succeed, she'll become obsessed. She'll think about you in silence, replay your words, question her own emotions. She'll find herself searching for signs of you in the quiet places of her life. That's the reversal. She stops being pursued. She starts to seek. And you don't chase. You don't explain. You don't beg for understanding. You remain the unsolved question that interrupts her peace. Emotional gap 3. The power of female competition. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't need to. And yet, something shifted. Not in what you said, but in what she saw. This is emotional gap. Number 3. The most primal, the most dangerous, the most denied. It isn't rare. It isn't modern. It is ancient, wired into human nature. It is the force that can take mild curiosity and turn it into relentless pursuit. The one she will never talk about openly, but the one her body responds to instantly. The power of female competition. She will never admit it, but nothing ignites her attraction faster than seeing other women drawn to you. In that moment, you're not just wanted, you are socially validated. This is not romance. This is not poetic longing. This is biological warfare. Her nervous system reads competition like a threat. It evaluates your status through how other women respond to you. Watch closely. It only takes a glance from another woman, a smile that isn't hers, a brief exchange of attention that doesn't involve her, and her energy changes. The man she labeled just a friend now registers as someone worth having. Her brain flips a switch. If other women desire him, there must be something in him worth fighting for. It's not conscious strategy, it's evolutionary programming. For thousands of years, nature rewarded women who chose men already chosen. The unclaimed man was a risk. The man who had been chosen was proven. You think this is a new phenomenon. It isn't. This is pre-language instinct. This is mating psychology. This is the jungle, wearing the mask of civilization. When a man is scarce, when he isn't easily accessible to everyone, her brain assigns value. It's not arrogance. It's not manipulation. It's the raw signal of abundance. The subconscious message is simple. He has options, and he chose me. That sentence doesn't fade quickly. It echoes in her mind. It keeps her tethered. Even Machiavelli understood this truth. Centuries ago, a prince with only one alliance is vulnerable. A prince courted by many holds leverage. The same principle applies to attraction. The man who is respected and noticed by many, but gives his commitment to few, holds loyalty without ever begging for it. But here's the nuance. This isn't about flirting with other women. It's not about staged jealousy. That's amateur work. True power here is becoming the kind of man whose presence naturally draws attention without trying. Why? Because your life is full. Because your vision is clear. Because the way you move generates respect. In any social setting, you're not chasing conversations. You're being approached. Women feel comfortable talking to you. They ask your opinion. They laugh freely in your presence. And she notices. She studies the way others orbit around you. She picks up on every signal, and she measures herself against it. You don't brag. You don't need to inflate your stories. You let the room speak for you. You're polite, never crude. Charming yet controlled. Open but not desperate. And you show her something rare. You are the kind of man women gravitate toward, but you chose her. Not because you lacked options, but because, from all the options, she was the one worth stopping for. That difference changes everything. It shifts her from comfort into awareness, from certainty into pursuit, because when she feels there's even a small chance she could lose you, when she realizes your attention isn't automatic, her nervous system reacts. It moves her from satisfaction into the instinct to secure you. That's when she begins to invest. Not because you demanded it, not because you asked, but because you positioned yourself slightly beyond reach and let her instincts do the work. Retention isn't requested. It is triggered. But here's the warning. This gap cuts both ways. Use it without skill. And you won't just fail, you'll damage the connection you built. Push too far, make her feel she's constantly competing, always having to prove herself for your attention, and you won't inspire desire. You'll create insecurity. You'll turn her from curious to defensive, from attracted to paranoid. You'll shift from being the mystery to being the threat. Pull back too much, make yourself too available. Too predictable. Too easy to access. And the opposite happens. Her interest evaporates. She stops imagining other women noticing you. She stops valuing your presence. She starts categorizing you as ordinary. The key is balance. And that balance isn't emotional, it's strategic. She should feel it just enough that you have options, that you are desired, that your presence is noticed by others. And yet, she should know you chose her. Not because you're playing games, not because you want to provoke jealousy, but because your life naturally pulls people in, and she happened to be the one you stopped for. You don't treat her badly. You don't push buttons for fun. You simply keep moving forward, building something real, living with direction, and that alone communicates. You could be anywhere, but you're here, and that is what makes her stay. Now, imagine this. You're at a gathering. A woman walks up and asks you something. You don't freeze. You don't ignore her to prove loyalty. You don't turn it into a performance to make your partner jealous. You respond calmly, confidently, like a man who knows himself and doesn't need to prove anything. You're accessible, but not eager, charismatic, but not performing. And she's watching, not your words, but how others respond to you. The ease in your movement, the comfort in your posture, the laughter you draw without effort. In that moment, she's no longer evaluating you in isolation. She's viewing you through the eyes of other women, and that changes the picture. Later, she opens up to you, shares something personal, a frustration, a stress, a fear. You listen, you support, but you don't absorb her entire emotional storm. You don't make her feelings your permanent home. You don't abandon your priorities to become her emotional cushion. You hear her without losing yourself. That's the difference. That's the balance. And that's the art of owning the third emotional gap, without letting it own you. Emotional gap for emotional leadership. When she senses you've lost your center, you stop being her anchor. You become her outlet, a place to dump emotion, a sponge for storms that aren't yours. That is the fastest way to lose respect. You are not a free emotional service. You are a man with presence, with purpose, who chooses when and how to give it. Up to this point, we've covered 3 forces of psychological gravity: validation, addiction, the high she can't quit; uncertainty, the fire she can't predict; competition, the instinct she can't suppress. Each one shapes how she sees you. Each one influences how she invests in you. And mastering them is not manipulation. It is understanding. That alone separates you from the masses. But now, we go deeper. The last 2 emotional gaps aren't for everyone. Most men never reach them, not because they're hidden, but because they demand precision. They are not tricks. They are structural truths. They don't just spark attraction. They forge obsession. And here is the 4th, emotional leadership. This is where most men fail. Not because they're weak, but because they don't know what strength really is. She doesn't need a savior. She needs a center. Someone solid. Someone calm. Someone who doesn't shake when she does. Her storms aren't invitations for rescue. They're tests not of your solutions, but of your stability. Even Machiavelli understood this. Centuries ago, power is not about control. It is about composure. The man who stays steady while others unravel commands silent authority. Women respond to that man because his emotional state isn't dictated by hers. She comes home frustrated. You remain grounded. She worries. You see clearly, not because you don't care, but because someone must be the ground beneath the chaos. Most men mirror her stress. She spirals, and they spiral with her. They panic. They rush to fix what was never asked to be fixed. They react. They do not lead. Leadership is not loud. It is quiet control. It is hearing her without absorbing her storm. It is listening without losing yourself. When she speaks, you don't jump in with advice. You don't scramble for solutions. You say, "That sounds frustrating. Tell me more." Not to comfort, not to impress, but to prove that her chaos cannot shake your frame. You create a space where she can feel without managing your reaction, where she can be vulnerable without triggering weakness in you. That space is rare, and women do not forget the men who can hold it. This is not coldness. It is immovability. Because if you cannot regulate yourself, you cannot anchor her. And if you cannot anchor her, you are not her man. You are just another weight she has to carry. True emotional leadership is not about being distant or dismissive. It is about being present without being consumed. It is about showing restraint without detachment. It is knowing that in moments of crisis, your calm is more valuable than your commentary. It is realizing that your energy sets the emotional climate of the relationship. You are the barometer. You are the grounding point. She can rage, cry, doubt, or fear, and still sense that you are steady, unmoved, clear, And because of that, she can rest. Most men chase the wrong kind of strength. They think strength is always acting, always fixing, always proving. But strength is often the opposite. Strength is the refusal to be moved by every emotional wave. It is standing in the same place and letting the storm break around you, while you remain intact. That is leadership. That is composure. That is power. When you embody this, you stop competing for her attention. She gives it freely. You stop chasing her trust. She entrusts herself to you. Not because you told her you're strong, not because you displayed dominance, but because she has lived inside your presence and found that it does not falter. This gap, emotional leadership, is what transforms attraction into devotion. It doesn't just keep her interested. It keeps her safe. Not safe from the world, but safe to be herself without worrying that her feelings will dismantle the man she chose. Emotional gap. 5. Psychological personalization. If you can't anchor her, you're not her man. You're just another weight she has to carry. Now we arrive at the 5th and final emotional gap. Psychological personalization. This is where most men get eliminated. Not because they don't care, not because they lack effort, but because they treat women like categories instead of decoding them as unique psychological systems. The 5th gap is not about your words. It's about your perception. You don't lead with charm. You lead with awareness. Not every woman runs on the same fuel. Some are driven by validation. Some are drawn to uncertainty. Others are triggered by competition. Your job is not to guess. Your job is to observe. Watch how she moves. Listen to what she repeats. Notice the patterns she can't hide. If she constantly asks how she looks, needs reassurance, and seeks confirmation before making decisions, her dominant gap is validation. You manage compliments like currency, not like confetti thrown at every moment. If she demands constant clarity, grows frustrated when you don't reply instantly, and asks about your plans, your past, your thoughts. Her dominant gap is uncertainty. You maintain the 30% shadow, never fully revealed, never fully explained. If she brings up other women, asks about your exes, and gets jealous without cause, her dominant gap is competition. You let her feel chosen, but never so secure that she forgets you have options. This is not manipulation. This is precision. Boys apply one formula to every woman. Men learn her system, her blueprint, her emotional fingerprint. Every woman has her own architecture, a private history, a set of fears and strengths she may never speak aloud, but always acts from. You want the ethical edge. Here it is. You do not exploit these gaps. You understand them, and through that understanding, you connect deeper than any man before you. If her need for validation comes from old wounds, you don't shame her for it. You help her feel seen without becoming her servant. If her need for certainty comes from broken promises, you don't weaponize it. You give her stability without losing your unpredictability. These gaps are not flaws. They are human design. They are pressure points in the psyche, and when you understand them, you lead without force, not by control, but by comprehension. You are not the man who bends her. You are the man who understands her so precisely, so deeply, that you become the only place she can rest without explanation. When that happens, you don't just attract her. You occupy space in her mind she didn't even know existed. You don't just win her heart. You claim the part of her she guards from the world, the part no man has ever earned access to. That is not romance. That is architecture. It's the careful construction of trust, customized for the person in front of you. And here's the truth. Most men will never reach this level. Not because it's impossible, but because it requires slowing down enough to actually see her. It demands listening without judgment, paying attention without agenda, and adjusting without losing yourself. You cannot fake personalization. She will feel it in your timing, in your responses, in the way you choose your words. The man who masters this final gap becomes unforgettable because he doesn't love women in general. He loves her specifically, and in a way that speaks to the deepest architecture of her mind. This is just the starting point. Remember, power without principle burns out fast. The tools you've just learned, validation, uncertainty, competition, emotional leadership, and psychological personalization are worthless in the hands of a man without a center. If you lack inner stability, she will feel it and she will disappear. You want power? Earn it, build it, live it. Don't just study her psychology, refine your own, because the man who understands her better than she understands herself must first master the battlefield inside his own mind. Let's recap: validation, the chemical addiction; uncertainty, the paradox she craves; competition, the instinct she hides; emotional leadership, the anchor she searches for; psychological personalization, the code only the elite decode. These are unfair advantages, but only for the man who deserves them. Here's your challenge: pick one. Commit to it for 7 days, not halfway, completely. Watch how she changes, how she responds, how the entire dynamic bends toward you without a single word raised. The men women follow are not louder. They are quieter, more focused, far more aware. If this opened your eyes, stay with us. There's more ahead: lessons that will sharpen your mind, deepen your presence, and change how you move in every room you walk into. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.